Well, much of my younger life, of course, was spent at home because before I was in school, and I was there in the house with my mother and got to participate in what she was doing. Not very exciting things like washing the clothes or cleaning the house, and occasionally she was a seamstress. So she would stop and have her sewing projects, which were always important to her.
Did your grandmother participate in that?
No, my grandmother, my immigrant grandmother, was off working as a domestic at other people's houses across town.
But she lived with you. She didn't live with
she lived with us all of her life.
Oh, okay.
But she would get on the bus or the trolley car, maybe two, in order to get to the better side of town, and would be a domestic. And occasionally I got to go with her and maybe help out a little, they would call it. But really what I was doing was taking advantage of where and how these people lived and looking at their magazines.
Were they rather well-to-do people? They were richer than you were.
Definitely, and some of them were small business people.
Oh.
I remember one man had a lumber yard, so they weren't worried about money, and they were often very generous with what they had because they knew my grandmother had her grandchildren that she would want to share things with, and she would end up bringing home old copies of Life magazine.
Did you ever find out where she was born in Europe?
She was, my grandmother?
Yes.
Well, I could find that out. She was from Austria.
Yeah, well, I understood that she was born somewhere in Austria-Hungary. Now, that photograph that we have, or did have of her, it had, on the back of it, it had the Hungarian name of this photographer.
Oh, really?
In whose studio it was taken. And now what really marks it as Hungarian is the fact that the man's, his first name, what we would call his first name, was Peter, but being Hungarian, it comes second. The personal names come second in Hungary. And that which makes Hungarian names different from everywhere else in Europe.
Well, as I understand it from my friends, that's not unusual in other areas of the country as well.
Oh.
Names are used to describe people from a certain area in town or with certain backgrounds.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about, but...
Well, okay.
But to get back to your grandmother...
When she got to Ellis Island, as I understand it, they classified her as Austrian-Hungarian.
They use that term?
I believe on their records.
But not Austrian.
I believe they had it on their records.
But she was definitely German-speaking person.
Yes. She definitely spoke German. Did they speak German in Austria?
Austria, the language is German. I mean, a somewhat different dialect from Germany, but it's still German.
Uh-huh. Well, you know what? We never heard much about her language or her dialect because she was very shy about talking about it, or maybe even knowing for sure.
Yeah.
About it, because she was in her early 20s when she came to the United States, and I don't know that she really understood all of the differences, but Ellis Island did classify her as, and I should.
We know she went to Ellis Island because that was. That's where immigrants came. That's how they got in. That was their entry point.
That's how they got through.
There being no airlines at the time, so
And she was able to do well because she passed the medical test. And not everybody who came could say that. And evidently they would not be eager to let certain people in if they had health problems.
Right.
So she passed that. And I probably should look up some of those records, which are not very specific, but if they do have information on them. So, but I do know that when I sometimes went downtown with her at the stores, like the department stores or the dime stores, which were very popular then, she would, if anybody started talking with her in English, she would freeze up because she was not confident enough to think that she, could do that kind of thing.
Oh, so she never was comfortable speaking English either.
Well, not very much. And so that meant she didn't talk much. And what she did, when she got home from work, and my mother had dinner, of course, and we ate dinner, it was very quiet, and then she would go in and sit in her corner on the couch and bring out her crochet work. And she was often sitting there for an hour or so after dinner crocheting before she went to bed early. And I was never too interested in learning how to crochet, but I knew that she enjoyed it. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this. Occasionally, before she would go to sleep, when I was older, a little older, probably more towards teenage years,
right,
she would ask me to rub her feet. And rubbing her feet meant that I took cream and put on them and massaged them and tried to get some of the bunions off, because her feet would obviously hurt.
Was she still working as a domestic when you were in high school?
Oh yes, she did that for some time. It became a definite routine, and it provided extra money for her and for giving to us to run the household. But occasionally I would pick something on her foot that would be painful, and she said, "Stop!" but that is a vivid memory of rubbing her feet and having her reactions to the pains in her feet. And she was always careful about buying 2 pairs of shoes when she was buying shoes. One pair was fancier, and she wore those to church, and another pair was more ordinary, not as fancy, so-called. Now, we wouldn't call them fancy today.
No.
But they were different. And she wore, plain house dresses and another thing, early in the morning when she was getting ready to go to work, I would still be in bed. We shared a room, twin beds, in a room when I was a teenager. And she would get up and sit in front of the mirror and take her long hair. It was a long time before she cut her hair. Took her long hair and wound it around and back and had what was called a bun. Right. And then she would put hairpins in it.
Well, that was the kind of cliche image of an elderly lady for a long time. Of this lady who had her hair in a bun and pins sticking out of it, isn't it?
I guess it was.
That sort of was the stereotype view of a librarian looked in that.
That could be. But later, at some point, her daughters convinced her to cut her hair and wear it softer around her face.
Right.
And it was hard for her to get used to that idea, but she did do it. Okay, well, so I guess maybe that covers my memories of that house, of playing on the sidewalks and walking to school and enjoying school, always enjoying school.
Now, did you go home for lunch?
Yes.
You did. You just walked a few blocks back.
But it would be, I forget, it could be 4 to 6 blocks. And we had time to do that. And it wasn't, the traffic wouldn't be too busy at that time. And so we were routinely did that. Oh, and the other thing I had remembered was, at that school, we all sold Aunt Kate's sugar cookies to make money for school projects. And I sort of enjoyed that because I got to go up to people's houses and talk to them. and also...
So the school, well, that was something the school did?
Yes, the school. Or allowed some group to do.
Oh.
I mean, it could have been a special group that worked with them. And I liked those cookies, and I liked being able to be a kind of salesperson.
So it's just like Girl Scout cookies.
Yes, except this was before Girl Scout cookies, I think, because Girl Scouts were a little older.
Right.
And we were young, and so they were mostly sold within a family. So then we left. Should I talk about leaving North New Jersey Street?
Well, we have a few minutes left, so go ahead.
And as I said, the school was number 27, and they were serious about teaching us our alphabet, our reading, and then our printing. So we were getting the basic things in those years. And when I went to Irvington, I then was in the 4th grade. And I was making all new friends because this was clear across town. And I didn't seem to have trouble making friends, but I didn't work too hard at it. I just was there to go to school, and whatever happened at school was how I made the friends. And we started learning about James Whitcomb Riley, the Hoosier poet. And we learned poems and memorized them. And once again, we might have to stand up and recite in the class. Reciting, I guess, was a big thing for kids in those days.
Yeah.
And so that's why we were not that, some of us were not that shy about talking in class. So there was the 5th grade and then the 6th grade, and then that morphed into 7th and 8th, which was called junior high school.
Right.
But it was not in a separate building.
Oh.
It was in the same building. It was with separate teachers. And that's when we began to have specialty teachers, like art. We had a very good art teacher. She knew her business. She knew what she wanted to teach us. We had a music teacher, and she taught us serious, we weren't singing opera or anything, but she taught us the serious kind of folk music.
Serious folk music?
Mm-hmm. About stories, about historical stories, and...
This was a music teacher?
A music teacher.
So did you learn how to play music, or?
Not necessarily, unless we did it at home on our own.
Right.
So, but we did sing in groups. And Indianapolis really was known for, at that time, was known for its good, well-trained teachers. and for some of its better schools. Now, I was not in an upper class school.
Okay,